Well, excellent ideas so far for our newsroom huddle. Keep them coming because remember, as you're working on your feature number 1, you should already be thinking about story ideas for your next feature because the news cycle never stops. So the more you can look, the more you can be curious, the more ideas you can get, the better off you'll be when it comes to pitch feature number 2. So good job overall, everyone. We're going to talk real quick about ethical considerations of journalism. And the reason I'm not going to talk in great length about it is because we talk about ethics throughout the semester. These are issues that will come up in all of our discussions and should always come up in our discussions because ethics is a part of everything that we do as journalists. So what are ethics? What's the difference between ethics and legal obligations? Obviously, they're up on your screen.
Overlap.
They don't always overlap. Is that what you said, Zoe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Explain that response.
So what is considered ethical may not always be legal, and what's legal may not always be ethical.
That's very true. So these are very different concepts, right? Because exactly like Zoe was saying, just because something is ethical does not make it legal or illegal. And just because something is legal doesn't necessarily make it ethical, right? So what are ethics? Let's define these. Let's work on defining these concepts. What is legal? That's usually the easiest place to start.
Defined by law.
Exactly. It's defined by a law. There's a written down ordinance of what is legal and not legal, right? I can check it by going and looking up what the law of whatever governing body I'm talking about is. Okay. What else are laws? What else is legal? They're written down. What's the purpose of a law?
Laws
Not
typically
always, but they're written to protect the society in which is governed.
Exactly. So laws are meant to protect and govern a society. So it are the rules that a society must follow to be considered in social agreement with one another, right? Because if we didn't outlaw murder, for instance, might be bad, right? Got Jack the Ripper going on all the time, or the Purge. All right. What else are laws? Why are they important?
I don't know if anyone said this, but it's probably kind of similar. They place like some type of like structure for everyone.
Yes, exactly. So it is structured, it is formal. You know, I don't know if you've ever been a part of like a Facebook group for a neighborhood. They get very interesting sometimes. Well, there was a conversation in our Facebook group this weekend in the neighborhood about whether it was legal to ride dirt bikes very loudly through the neighborhood at 11 o'clock at night. There were some people in the neighborhood that were concerned about the amount of noise that was being made by some teenage boys who were running dirt bikes through the neighborhood on Saturday. Okay. And so we could talk in our neighborhood group about here's what the city ordinance says about noise. Here's what's considered street legal vehicles. And we actually could go and pull documents to show yes, this is legal, or no, it's not. And there is no question, there is no gray line in that. So as a structured, as a society, right? And they're typically not subject to interpretation. Now, of course, laws can be rewritten, they can be struck down, they can be interpreted differently by the highest courts through appeals, but for the most part, there's very little subject to interpretation. If the speed limit is 30, that means 30 is the maximum speed you're supposed to go legally. So that's what laws are. And we can think about different laws that we have in our society. What about ethics? What are ethics?
They're more moral based, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're based on our morals typically. And because they're based on our morals, what does that mean?
They're sometimes more subjective.
They are much more subjective in the terms that what is ethically right for me may not be ethically right for you, right? And so I may have a different ethical stance on something than you do. So it's about what we consider subjectively right and wrong. So who sets ethical boundaries? Who sets ethics? Is it the government?
It's
I
usually
think, sorry.
it's usually just like a group of people who come to some sort of agreement.
Okay, so typically it is a group of people. Olivia, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say that laws kind of like reflect society's ethics, or they're supposed to, I guess.
Absolutely. So a lot of our laws actually come from ethical stances, right? We consider it ethically wrong to murder someone, hopefully. And so therefore, we create a law that says murder is illegal. So a group of people, in this case, the government, has come together and established what they consider ethically right and wrong in terms of this subject. And then they go and make laws about it. But it's not just government. It can be any group of people, like Zoe was saying, right? So a profession can have ethical boundaries, such as journalism. And even within groups of people, there can be disagreement, right? A lot of journalists disagree about a lot of different things. But there is usually this overall stance of what is considered truly ethical. But it's more abstract because it's very oftentimes it's not written down at all. There are no explicit rules. And even if you break an explicit written down rule, there are no formalized forms of punishment like there are with laws, right? You break the law, you're going to jail or paying a fine. With ethical boundaries, violations often lead to professional consequences, but they're not punishable outside of the profession. You can be judged by individuals, you can be criticized, things like that. There are obviously punishments or consequences for all of our actions, but they are not necessarily formalized to a point of legal standards in terms of ethics. But the intent of ethics is to maintain standards of professionalism and what we consider right and wrong within an industry, within a group, and even within ourselves, because ethics aren't solely defined by groups. We should all have our personal ethics as well. But as we've covered, these are often subject to interpretation. And a lot of times they're on a case-by-case basis. I can say, I believe such and such is wrong, but when I come against a case that has other considerations, I may change my ethical stance, right? So in terms of ethics for our profession, in terms of journalism, ethics help us understand our professional boundaries. It helps us understand who is a journalist and who is not. If you remember our conversation back in the introduction of this class, we talked about the fine line between, who is a community journalist, who's someone that's like publishing on Twitter or providing information on their blog, versus a professional journalist. And what differentiates those two groups are these professional ethics. It's the standards of work that we expect from our industry. And so ethics can help direct journalists to appropriate behavior, to know what is right and wrong. It makes our jobs easier in a lot of senses because we know that, hey, in order to do my job correctly, according to the ethical standards of my industry, I need to verify my information through two sources, right? There's no question about that. And so even though I may bend the rules sometimes, ethically speaking, there's a standard of a two-source verification. It also holds us accountable for our work, not only to our news organization, but also to the public to ensure that we're doing our duty. Most journalism ethics are driven by newsrooms, so your organization will have its own set of newsroom ethics. And then individual reporters should have their own ethical standards as well. Again, almost all of our ethical decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. You may have your standard answers, but there are often gray areas of like, oh, would I consider that ethically right or wrong? For instance, we've talked about objectivity in the class, right? And we talked about overall, generally speaking, we want journalists to be objective. But what about the cases of people crying at the scenes of school shootings? What about yelling, in an opinion piece, things like that? So you can see that there are gray areas. Now, a strong ethical code is critical to our public service mission. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you want to be a public servant, if you want to be a journalist, you have to have a strong ethical stance, because it really is what differentiates us from the rest of writers and people who are trying to persuade you from their agenda. And so it helps our society get better information, and it allows democracy to continue because we're fulfilling the roles that democratic journalism is meant to fulfill. So where do our ethical standards come from? Well, there are two primary news organizations that set the standards of ethics for the profession. The first is the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ. And then for broadcasters specifically, we have Radio, Television, Digital News Association, or RTDNA. And both of these organizations have codes of ethics that the rest of the industry very much pays attention to and tries to follow. And so you'll often hear cited, the SPJ Code of Ethics or the RTDNA Code of Ethics. In addition, academia or colleges, professors, students, journalism students play a large part in determining what is ethically sound and what is not. Conversations that we have in class about whether we consider objectivity a worthwhile ethical goal still. These are conversations that then drive the future of the industry. As I said before, each individual news organization will have their own standards of ethics. And again, these are often not written down explicitly. They're just things that you learn because you're part of the organization and you're doing work. And then individuals as well hold their own ethical standards. So some of the primary ethical standards for journalism, above all, it should be seek truth and report it. That's what our job is as journalists, right? And so that is broken down into 4 categories within the SPJ Code of Ethics: accuracy, fairness, honesty, and courage. And so accuracy means checking facts and having the double verification of sources like we've talked about. It means adding context where appropriate. Keep in mind that accuracy does not mean just not telling lies. It also means presenting the information in the most accurate and appropriate way possible. That means balancing the facts. That means maintaining our independence and reporting any obvious bias that we might have. Not posting until we're absolutely sure about something. This is where, the conflict of a news value of like breaking news really goes against journalism ethics, because it often leads to a lack of accuracy, which is an ethical concern for our industry. In terms of independence, we should not report on groups that we're a part of, right? So Seep would not want to write about the soccer team because he's a member of the soccer team. Can you ever be unbiased, Seep, about the soccer team? Probably not. You're going to have an opinion on it regardless, right? And so we want to maintain independence in the way that we write. Now, that doesn't always fall for like cultural standards, for instance, like if you are an LGBTQ member, that doesn't prevent you from writing about LGBTQ issues, right? Because you have a unique perspective that can allow you access to sources and share perspectives that perhaps a straight writer would not have. But what it means is that you're trying not to have conflicts of interest as much as possible. Again, fairness means trying to represent the voiceless, talking to minority communities, giving them a platform of voice, emphasizing the human experience in things, which is where feature reporting becomes so important, and avoiding that parachute journalism where you just descend on an event because it's breaking and timely and not caring about the effect of the community that you're leaving behind. I know we've talked about school shootings before because that's what I cover. When a national correspondent comes in and like very just roughly deals with the community, it's the local journalists then that have to pick up afterwards, and that community continues to struggle with that after. And then honesty refers to being honest with your sources, making sure that they know what the piece is for, making sure you're representing yourself as a journalist, being very straightforward with them, and not trying to hide things from your sources in order to get information. And then obviously being honest with your audience. This is especially important when you have content that is sponsored, editorial, or even advertorial in nature, because we want our audience to understand the difference between objective journalism and sponsored journalism. That's really important in terms of ethical standards. And being courageous just means standing up for what is right. When you know that there is something wrong going on, you need to stand up for it and uncover it as a journalist. And that often means having to be impartial about an issue. The second major type of ethical standard for journalism is minimizing harm. For our sources, this means always ensuring that we're putting our sources in the best light possible for them. Even people who do really bad things, we need to still paint a fair and honest picture of it, right? Allowing the sources to provide feedback, reply, commentary to any controversy that we're reporting about them. So if I get news, for instance, that, I don't know, I'm just going to make something random up, but I get news that Ryan, for instance, is being accused of academic misconduct, and I'm going to report that, right? Well, if I don't go to Ryan and say, hey, you've been accused of academic misconduct, that is not treating my source with the proper ethical standard. I should always go to someone who is accused of something and ask them for comment. They can obviously say, I don't have a comment, I don't want to speak to you, but we need to give them the opportunity to. And of course, Ryan would never be charged with academic misconduct. It was just something that popped in my head. We don't want to use anonymous sources. We don't want to invade our sources' privacy. And we do not conduct email interviews ever, period, because we cannot represent our source properly by conducting email interviews. You can take statements from people if they send you emails, that's fine, but don't conduct your emails or your interviews through email. It does not give your source the ability to respond. And so it's considered ethically wrong to do email interviews. For the community, this means trying to minimize the harm to the community, means understanding societal issues that are going on across the globe, representing diverse communities fairly, making sure that our writing is representative of all cultures and not pointing to different biases that we may hold or that are prevalent within our communities. We also want to really get to know the community, to immerse ourselves in it so we're fairly representing them and allowing the community to be the expert, right? So instead of saying what we think as an outsider is going on in this community, we want to go to that community and have them tell us what that community is feeling, right? In terms of society, it means we have the opportunity to influence change. It means that we have the ability to change the narrative, to give voice to the voiceless. But that involves reporting the good, bad, and the ugly. And I know as student journalists particularly, we're afraid of that bad and ugly and the consequences of it. But it is ethically important for us to represent all sides of the story. balancing our work through multiple sources, and avoid pandering, which means indulging people's what they want. Sometimes you got to give them the vegetables of news too, what they actually need to know. Acting independently is really important ethically for journalists. This means that we are never to accept gifts more than $10 from any source, because sources often try to give journalists trips and tchotchke, and I can't tell. I've been offered so many things from different people, and anything over $10, you should always just reply, no, thank you, appreciate it, right? Because the intent of that person who's trying to give you something is to sway you, to influence you, to write about them in a positive light, and that's ethically irresponsible. We should never be interviewing our friends and family as sources. And if I see that within our journalism for the feature class, you'll be marked off as not having a source, because it is bad for the story, because you're not able to be unbiased, and it's bad for your relationships. There are many, many journalists who have tried to use their friends or family as sources, and then when it's published, that person gets angry with the journalist, right, for the way that they feel they were represented. It's just bad overall. Don't do it. But you can use your friends and family for other connections, right? So use them as that intermediary. Ask your mom, if your mom is a breast cancer survivor and you're doing a feature story on breast cancer, ask your mom, hey, can you introduce me to your friends, so that you're removed at least one step, ethically speaking, right? We also want to act independently of pressures from advertisers. We don't want to support a business or promote them in a way that would make it seem like advertising. This is why we try to be unbiased, we try to be unbiased in our reporting. And we want to avoid promotion unless it's very, very transparent to the viewer that it's promotion. So for instance, if we're doing a canned food drive for the United Way, we're going to be positive about the United Way because we're a sponsor, but we need to tell them, WBRC is a media sponsor for the United Way, and we're collecting donations for this cause, right? So we need to be explicit with advertising or business connections that we have. And always remember, just because a business advertises with you does not give them editorial or content rights over what you as a journalist are writing, and don't ever let a newsroom manager tell you otherwise. We should never allow our sources to read our stories prior to it being published either. This is called prior review, and it's something that we do not do in journalism. An additional ethical standard that is being set specifically by SPJ, and we've talked about this a little bit already, is transparency, which means explaining our reporting choices, showing the audience our process. But it's important within transparency to alert our audience if we know we're reporting about something that we have bias or conflicts of interest. This is why we don't report on groups that we're a part of, because we can never be separate from it. We could never be fully transparent because we're using inside sources. And then in terms of corrections, there is an ethical way to correct something online that has been changed. And it's taking a screenshot of that inaccurate information, taking down the original post so no one can spread that inaccurate information anymore, and then acknowledging the mistake along with an attached screenshot of the mistake to a new tweet that shows what the correction is. This allows us to be transparent and accountable for the mistakes that we make. Overall, ethics really boils down to one main thing: treat others the way you want to be treated. It's the golden rule that you've learned since preschool, right? But you would never treat a source or treat even someone accused of something. Don't treat them any differently than how you would want to be treated. So let's talk about this in terms of a case study for the next 20 minutes, okay? Here's a real life instance of something that happened, and I want us to decide whether the decisions made by the stakeholders were ethically appropriate or not. Northwestern University has a student newspaper called the Daily Northwestern. It's an independently and run newspaper, and it's run by students. So it is not university based. In November of 2019, roughly 150 students were protesting Jeff Sessions coming to speak on campus. Demonstrators were climbing through open windows. They pushed through the doors of the building when they didn't have access to it. And so they were violating some of the campus policies. The newspaper sent reporters and a photographer to cover both the speech and the protest as it was happening. And the photographs of the speech and the protest appeared online. The students who were protesting complained that they were being shown protesting, that it was traumatizing and invading to their personal protections. And the Daily Northwestern issued an apology for their coverage. They called their coverage traumatizing and invasive. And these are direct quotes from their apology letter. While our goal is to document history and spread information, nothing is more important than ensuring that our fellow students feel safe. This is from the newspaper. We know we hurt students that night, especially those who identify with marginalized groups. According to the SPJ Code of Ethics, ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. Now, after this apology was issued by the Daily Northwestern, professional journalists and others accused the newspaper of apologizing for doing its job, and said that their apology was not ethically appropriate for journalism because they were merely reporting facts. So, is an apology the appropriate response from the Daily Northwestern? Is there something else that the student journalist should have done? Let's talk about it.
I have lots of opinion.
I'm sure you do, Zoe. So the Alabamian is set up very similar to the Daily Northwestern. So if this had happened on campus, Zoe, what do you think the Alabamian would have done?
So, because we are also an independently student-run newspaper, if I were put in this situation, I don't feel like an apology would have been appropriate. This is mostly because Montevallo is a public campus, so anything that's done on campus in an open space should be reported on if it is newsworthy. And and a lot of this came up about photographing protesters in the last several months with Black Lives Matter protests and such. The debate about invasion of privacy. But in my opinion, and I think I share the opinion with a lot of journalists, is if you're doing it in a public space and it's also done that is going to receive a lot of public attention, I feel like the idea of invasion of privacy kind of goes out the window.
Okay. What do you guys think? What do you think about Zoe's stance?
I think that the students that were running the newspaper felt obligated to apologize because they are part of the student body and they felt like they had to protect their reputation. Whereas if it were a newspaper like the Shelby County Reporter, they wouldn't apologize because they have no affiliation with the students they were reporting on.
Well, so let's take that as an example. There were protests in Shelby County for both BLM and the Capitol protests. There were local protests for both sides. People who report for the Shelby County Reporter often live in Shelby County. They're members of the community that they serve. So to what degree are we obligated to protect our reputation as members of the communities that we serve? What do you think?
I think it's kind of like in a situation like that, if you don't apologize and you're like a public figure, people will look at you differently and they'll just have other things to say, even though it doesn't always matter. But if you're trying to protect your reputation, it'll follow you wherever you go.
So let's think about this from two sides, because I think you're absolutely right that there is a culture of apologizing when we face pushback. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but what does an apology say for our reputation as journalists then? So we're talking about an apology as a reputation as a community member. What does issuing an apology say about the reputation that we want as professional journalists?
I feel like issuing an apology in like these kind of circumstances kind of puts out the statement that you're easily persuaded, and that can really hurt your reputation as a news source.
So let's think about this outside of the Northwestern case, because obviously this is a conversation, like Zoe mentioned, that is ongoing as protest coverage happens. Over the early spring and summer, as we saw a lot of Black Lives Matter protest, there were many conversations about, do we show the faces? Do we identify members of these protests who could face backlash from employers, from bigoted communities for participating in this movement? And at that time, there was a large response in favor of not showing, of blurring, or, showing the backs of heads and things like that. More so than I perhaps have ever seen in terms of professional support for that than any other time. Fast forward to a few months ago, or gosh, it hasn't even been months, has it? Less than a month ago, with the Capitol protest. And it was like part of journalism's job to identify members of the Capitol protests and make them face the consequences for the things that they did. Ethically speaking, is it right to have two different standards for two protest movements? This is a question I'm asking. I'm not saying there is a right or wrong answer here.
I don't think that, well, the reason that the journalists had to identify for the Capitol Hill, I don't think they were protests. I think it was a terrorist attack. And that's why they had to identify them, because the former president, incited insurrection. And so that was their civic duty as journalists to help the FBI investigate that.
Okay. Now, what about BLM protests that turned, not that they were connected necessarily to the BLM movement, because I don't believe that many of them were, but there were cases of destruction, of breaking laws that happened after those protests? Do we believe that those members who participated in illegal activity after those instances should have been identified in the same way that we dealt with the insurrection? And I'm glad that you made that distinction, Julia. There's a difference between a protest and terrorism.
I'll let someone else answer that, because
No, I'm not asking you specifically.
Okay. I don't feel
I'm
like
asking the class
platform to answer that, so I'll let someone.
Sure.
I think so. I mean, I feel like it's fair in the sense, if you're gonna damage something and cause trouble for somebody else, I feel like you should have to face the consequences of it.
Yeah, and I say yes too, because I feel like it had nothing to do with the movement at all, just people just acting crazy pretty much. Yeah. So yeah.
Is there anyone who thinks that there should be different standards? And it's okay if you do. There are many people who support having different standards for the two movements. So these are serious questions we have to ask ourselves and think about, right? What really is fair? If we're willing to do it for people who are destroying federal property, who are making threats against others, then as journalists, are we ethically obligated to do it for people who are threatening government officials locally or destroying property locally? Something a lot of newsrooms have had to consider. So In the case of the Northwestern, how many of you sitting on that editorial board would have voted for an apology? Raise your hand. Is there anyone who would have voted for an apology? Okay, someone who hasn't spoken up, tell me why you wouldn't have issued an apology.
I'll talk. So I want to ask for an apology simply because of what Zoe said. Like, it's public, like you put yourself out there, you put yourself in that position. It's not like you're asking for it because you're not, but like it's bound to happen in a way.
Okay. What other reasons might you give for not issuing an apology?
I don't think an apology should have been issued because, like, you're not doing anything technically wrong. You're just literally doing what you're supposed to do. You're reporting on what's happening, telling what happened and everything and who was there. So there's no need to apologize for the truth, really.
Okay. And I think that in terms of where I would stand ethically and professionally, I'm with you guys. I don't think an apology was necessary. I don't think it was right. In fact, I think it's ethically wrong for them to issue an apology as a journalist. So should their coverage have been any different? You can see their front page here. Is there anything that they could have done to protect students better? Should they have run the story at all?
I definitely think that they should have run the story regardless of how people felt about it. But as far as how to better protect students, that becomes a little bit more tricky. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about it in terms of, let's say there was a protest. Let's say it was a Black Lives Matter protest here on campus. Would you show faces? How many of you would show faces? Public protest. Would there be anyone who would want to protect faces? All right, Terry, tell me why you want to protect faces.
Going back earlier to what was said, I think everybody kind of like views, like have their own views and own opinions about certain things. And I think that in order to protect those people or their workspace or anything of that nature, I think it would be best to do. That's just my opinion.
Let me ask, do you think that we have an ethical obligation as a profession to protect people who do dangerous things or
Like-
risky behaviors?
I think that if you're endangering others, then maybe there isn't such a need to protect them, I guess.
So it comes back to this rule, right? How do we minimize harm? But this is tricky because there are multiple sides to minimizing harm here. There's minimizing harm of sources who could face potential backlash, and even face, in some cases of reporting, face jail time, fines, like real life consequences, right? So that's one stance of minimizing harm. But the other part of minimizing harm is reporting the good, bad, and the ugly of society, right? And so if there are things that are illegal going on, if there are activities that this person, if caught, if even, like, let's say journalists weren't there and they were just caught, they would face the same consequences. So all we're doing is showing that it happened. That potentially is minimizing harm through showing society what is going on. So again, we're talking about a lot of gray space here, and this is totally normal within ethical case studies. I've sat in many a newsroom meeting where we spend over an hour trying to discuss whether we're going to put a soundbite into a newscast because we're not sure if it's ethically responsible to do so. It's totally normal. But that's where part of your individual ethics are important as well, because you need to know how you stand on certain subjects. And so I applaud, our members who raised their hand, even if the rest of the class was going another way, right? Because it shows you have a strong ethical stance. And there will be times in a newsroom where you're going to have to decide, do I go against my admins? Do I go against my newsroom leadership and stand up for my own ethical beliefs in this instance? And I've certainly had to do that in my career, where I refused to go and talk to a mother who had just lost her child in a murder case, who did not want to speak to us, and they wanted me to go knock on her door. No, I will not do it. Send another reporter. And they did, and that's fine. But I knew I had to stand up for what I believed in that moment and protect my source, who didn't want to speak at that moment. And so I wasn't going to be the one to do it. But it's stuff that we all have to consider and think through. So I have posted a case study to Canvas. It is about the death of Kobe Bryant, which we just had the 1-year anniversary of his death. You may be familiar with the case where a reporter from the Post tweeted out just a few hours after Bryant's death, reminding people about the sexual assault allegations against Kobe to represent the victims.